All right, how's it going, everyone? This is Brian, and welcome back to the TechSec Playbook, your guide to apps, software, and tech, but in a fun way, I promise. So I think I have finally figured out a really easy way to explain how to use AWS in any sort of environment, any sort of server, any sort of anything. Because let's be honest here, building on AWS is hard, and it's hard because there's so many things that you can do with it. So it's kind of like a sandbox, but then given the sandbox, you really have to know exactly what you're doing, and you have to also make sure that you don't make mistakes, because if you do, things won't work. So given that freedom, it also comes at a cost of time and complexity. So that's where I feel like this service will be a really helpful awakening to anybody that really wants to know how to get started using AWS services, but in a way that also manages the security of not giving access to long-lived credentials, which we'll talk about, or really just giving those accesses to like admin, everything, because then if somebody got access to those credentials, they could just go ham in your account, and you definitely don't want that. I guarantee it. So that's where this video is going to come in to help illuminate for you how to use this really cool service. So I think this video will be really helpful for anybody that just kind of struggles to understand, I want to give permission to these services. I want to give permission to these assets within AWS, within my organization, but how do I actually get those services and permissions into my scripts, into my applications, into other places that are outside of the console? So if this video is interesting to you, or that idea is interesting to you, then you're definitely going to want to continue and listen along, as we're going to go through a service called AWS IAM Identity Center. It used to be called AWS SSO, or AWS Single Sign-On, but now it's called IAM Identity Center. It is a centralized place for you to manage all of the access for your users, for your roles, for any sort of list of permissions that you need to then send to a server or a script or an environment or a virtual environment, and then use your AWS resources that are a part of that scope. So this is going to be a really helpful video for anybody that just wants to get started. They want to experiment with AWS. They want to build applications. And the best feature, I think this is the best feature possible, is that anytime that it generates the credentials for that scope, the time will time out after a certain period of time. So if you are the admin, you could set it to be like 4 hours. You could set it to be like 6 hours. You could set it to be an hour. But what's amazing is that we get rid completely of these long-lived credentials. So that becomes a problem if you have IAM users. And I was just giving a talk about this at AWS Reinforce, and I'll drop a link to that video in the comments below. But one of the issues that can come up is if you create an IAM user and then you create an access key, well, those credentials never expire. They will expire once you delete them, but they are always persistent. They're always the same. So you would have to remember to delete that key and then recreate it. The amazing part about IAM Identity Center is that it's recycling the keys and the access for you around the clock. You never even have to think about it. Your access to that scope will just time out after a certain point. So it's just amazing because it's your ability to just get the credentials that you need, put those into your env file or wherever you're storing them, and then you have access to the IAM scope for as long as those credentials exist. Once they expire, you don't have access anymore. So this is like amazing, because this is like exactly what, if I was going to start building on AWS, this is exactly what I would want to know. So hopefully this is helpful for you, and we'll roll the video and get started. So as you'll see, I'm on the AWS IAM Identity Center homepage. So it's going to be this service that we care about. And it's called basically a service to help you with your workforce identity and centrally managing access to AWS. So what does that actually mean for us? So let's dial in a little bit here to what we see. So this is basically just a diagram of all of these different services. And from IAM Identity Center, you're able to then cross-reference which accounts should have access to what. So a great example of this would be, so everything kind of starts here in this one account that basically tells what all the other accounts can do. So this one, this one, this one, this one, right? So let's say that this service goes there, this service is there, this service is there. So if all of these services are within this account, you're using IAM Identity Center to then say that this has them, but then this one and this one and this one don't. And then, for example, maybe Code Whisperer is attached to all of them because that's something that you want all of your accounts to do, but maybe IoT only gets access to this one. So that's where within all of this, you're able to then just say, hey, tell this account, tell this account, tell this account, tell this account what they can and can't do within AWS. But it's all from one central managed location, which is really helpful and really convenient. And especially as you start thinking about how to streamline this, so you're able to then have single sign-on access, you can manage your workforce, you can improve the controls, all this stuff. So you can read more about why this is helpful and why you might want to use this for different groups, different types of AWS services, and there's other companies that are using this as well. So it is, in a sense, a workforce identity source tool and a way to centrally manage these resources and access to them. But it's much more helpful to see an actual real example of actually setting this up. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go to an AWS account that doesn't have IAM Identity Center set up, and we're going to go and do that together. So you can actually see the power of IAM Identity Center in action. Once you log into the AWS console, you'll search for IAM Identity Center. So you'll type that in here, you'll click this, and that will redirect you to this page. So if you haven't set anything up before, this is what this page will look like. So it'll give you some information about what we're going to be setting up together, and it'll give you some of the benefits and the features that we just talked about, some of the use cases around IAM Identity Center and about AWS organizations and how to set this up. To set up and enable IAM Identity Center, we'll click the Enable orange button. We'll use the Enable recommended flow. So you could just set this up in a single AWS account and only have it be for this single account. But the benefit of enabling it with AWS organizations is that you do have that multi-account permission access. You also have the ability to access multiple accounts and in a simple way. And then you can also have a little bit more granularity on how you're managing, customer managed applications. So there's a lot of great benefits that you can also read about, but we're going to use enable with AWS organizations. So we'll click continue. And this will take about a minute to set up here. So once this is all created, you'll see that it's created my organization instance here. So that's up here. You can see that it created a name for it, which is a number. You can get all of this information here. So you'll see that there is identity source, there's a region, there's an org ID, we have a portal URL here, and we could also name our instance if we wanted to. You don't necessarily need to do that, but all of the information is basically here. So now what we'll do is we will then create some configurations so you can actually see how to use this in another browser window and then also in some different environments. First things first, let's create a user. So this would be either created for yourself or your team member or another person that you might be working with. So you'll go to users and you'll say add user, and we'll get this username, so we'll just say this is Brian because that's me. And then you'll put in an email, you'll put in confirm email, you'll put in a first name, last name if you want to, but you could also just generate one-time password, shares with the user, or you could allow them to basically like create their own password, but we'll just use the one-time password. You could share with that, and then I'll put in my email here. You also put our first name and a last name, and then that becomes your display name. You'll click next. And then I don't have any groups yet, so what I'll do is that I'll create a group. And in this group, I will call it dev S3. So what we're going to do is that we're going to create a group that has access to call an S3 bucket and then download some data out of it. So we're just going to call this dev S3. And we're going to say a group for downloading S3 bucket financial data. And then we'll create the group. Now the group lives in IAM Identity Center. We'll go back here. We'll give this a refresh. And now I see that the dev S3 group is there. We'll click next. And this all looks good to me. And the user is in that group. So we'll click add user. And then now the password is there, which I will be able to now use to log into IAM Identity Center, which we will do next. So an important thing to note is that when we are using IAM Identity Center, you'll have your access portal URL, and then you'll have a username, and then you'll have a password that you can use. You can also add in two-factor authentication into your account to add extra layers of security, which you should totally do. And what we'll do is that when we go to this other page, this is where we'll now be able to log into our IAM Identity Center portal and then get access to all of the permissions and the groups that this user or the user that is logging into the portal should have access to. To log in to our IAM Identity Center portal, so we already have our username from before, and then we'll throw in our password, which was generated for us. We'll sign in. And then it's going to redirect and say that you'll need to have a built-in authenticator. So let's just use like the built-in authenticator. We'll say allow, use Touch ID. And that's been registered. Great. So now we'll say done, redirecting. And then now the new password. So if you use the same password, that won't work. So just add a couple keys, set new password. And now we'll have to log in again. Sign in. Sign in with Touch ID. And now we're logged in. So what's interesting is that when we're signed in here, we don't actually have access to anything because the group hasn't been assigned a permission set. So we're going to do that in the next step. Back in our IAM Identity Center dashboard, we see that my user was just created, they're enabled because we just logged in, and we have an MFA device attached to it. So that's great. So now what we're going to do is that we're going to go to permission sets. And that's going to redirect us to a place where we can create a permission set. And we're going to do a predefined permission set or a custom permission set. So those are basically different types of operations. So the permission set is a list of these predefined lists of IAM permissions. So this is usually for giving admin access to everything, maybe only access to certain data analytic services, security services, or view only access to metadata across different resources across AWS. Otherwise, you could do a custom permission set, and then that's where you're actually creating fine-grained permissions, which is what we're going to be doing, but those are just two different options. So what we can do is that if we want to provision specific access to something, we could do an inline policy. And inline policies are really great because what you can do is that you can get really granular about what access you want to give this group. So what we're going to do is that we're going to download some data from Nasdaq. We're going to put that in an S3 bucket, and then we're going to then give the S3 dev group access to that S3 bucket. So I'm on nasdaq.com, and I will include this link in the description below. But what we'll do is that we're going to download this historical data. So that goes into our downloads. And that was saved on my computer as a CSV file. So then what we're going to do is that we're going to go to S3 and we're going to go to create a bucket. And if you need to get S3, you can just search for S3 at the top. We're going to do a general purpose bucket. We're going to call it IAM Identity Center Testing 0610 2024. And we'll keep all the defaults the same. Server side is on, and we'll create our bucket. So now we'll copy this, search for it, we'll go to this bucket, and now we'll see that there isn't anything in there. We're going to drag and drop this file into our bucket. Click upload. Boom. So that's great. And if we actually wanted to see the data, we can just like load this up and see what this file consists of. So you'll see here that the close and last price, volume, open, high, and low, and those are the dates, and that's for Apple. So again, this is just like a super simple CSV file that we just wanted to have some data to point to. So now when we close this, we'll see that this file exists in this bucket. It is a CSV file. It was uploaded today, and that looks pretty good. So now what we're going to do is that we're going to go back here, and we're going to need to create an IAM policy that will give access to this file or the files within that bucket, which we'll do next. In order to get the IAM policy, something that we could do is that we can use Amazon Q to help us generate that. So this is a plugin that goes into Visual Studio Code, which you can download from the website. And what we're going to do is that I'm going to adjust these tabs a little bit. So for that S3 bucket, we have an ARN, which is the unique identifier for our bucket, which has our data in from S3 that we just downloaded from Nasdaq. So what we'll do is that we're going to open up a new tab in Amazon Q, and we're going to say, generate, please, a IAM inline policy for our S3 bucket. This should have access to this ARN. And then if we go back here, we can go back to create permissions. We can actually copy this code, and we can say this is the starter policy below, and I want to make the S3 bucket objects downloadable. Put that in there and then press enter. So now Amazon Q is working. So fast, so fast. This is wild. So let's check that out. Let's see what we got. So here's an IAM inline policy that allows downloading the objects from the S3 bucket with the ARN. So then we have this, and it's allowing S3 get object for everything that's inside of this bucket. So let's copy that, and let's actually see if this will work. And I think we might want to do some other operations. So we'd say, if I wanted to also list objects, would that be a resource policy that would be needed? Also, do I need to include this as well as this in order to get files out of the S3 bucket. So to allow listing objects in the S3 bucket, you need to add the S3 list bucket action. You also need to include both the bucket ARN and the bucket ARN with the wildcard. Here's updated policy. So list bucket and then all that. So we'll copy that, give that a save here. So this is just some updated policies. Hopefully this will give us exactly what we need. So we'll click next. And we'll call this permission. We'll call this, what did we call in this other group? Dev S3. Let's call that PS for permission set, and this is the PS for group to access. And then we'll copy that ARN. Right there. And then that's the session duration. So we could set this for maybe 4 hours. This will give us, plenty of time to access this without, needing to worry about anything. So we'll click next. And that all looks good. So we'll say create. And now we've created a permission set with those policies for the S3 resource. And now that lives within our IAM Identity Center. So we're going to navigate over to the AWS Accounts tab, and that's under multi-account permissions. And we're going to click on our organization that was set up. And what we can do is that we can assign users or groups to this. So what we'll do is that we'll assign groups. So dev S3. And that's also underneath this. So we can just click that. We'll do next. And we're going to assign a permission set. Next. So that all looks good. We'll click submit. This will configure the information. So then now that permission set is associated with there, and also users and groups. So if we can now assign users and groups to this permission set. So go to user, that's my user. We'll click next. We'll assign that permission set. Click next. Scroll down, submit. So now that user is a part of this organization and also that permission set. So let us see if that worked. So what we can do is that we can go back to our IAM Identity Center, which should be here. And we might need to log in or log out again, but I see that if you click dropdown, now we have dev S3 PS, which is that permission set. And we also have access keys, which we will check out in just a second. So once we've clicked on the access keys section, that will give us this pop-up, which gives us credentials for that time limit that we had set initially. And what we're able to do now is get credentials to the AWS user or the role of that permission set. And then we can use that in virtual environments, in scripts, with the AWS SDK, anything that we might need credentials for. We're able to then have this identifier that will then give us access to everything at the top level that this dev S3 PS permission set has access to. So that has access to S3, and we'll be able to then go to option number 2 and copy this, and then we could store that in a credentials file. Also, something that we could do is that if we wanted to inject these as exported key value pairs, we could do the same thing, copy that, and then enter those into a terminal window, and then those will then be populated for that specific session. So just a couple of ways that we can persist the credentials and then use those in various scripts like we'll be doing. Now to bring this home and show how we can use Python to download our data in S3 using our credentials, let's try to actually download this data without any credentials. So if we were to go to our file, which is here, and we just went to the object URL, so you think that you'd be able to just click on this and get it, but you get access denied. And the reason for that is because we have block public access on the bucket. So under permissions, block public access is on. So that means that none of the objects within this bucket will be able to be accessed. You're going to need pre-signed URLs or ways to authenticate access to the S3 bucket to then get access to the content. So that's why in here, this file, for all intents and purposes, is private and locked down behind the credentials of this AWS account. So how do we get data out of S3, right? So what we're going to do is that we're going to use Python and Boto3, and we're going to use some libraries to allow us to download that data from S3. So what we're going to do is that I already have a Code Sandbox Python project loaded up. So what we're going to do is that we're going to use pip to install some dependencies. And to do that, first, what we're going to do is that we're going to create a virtual environment. So we're going to go here, we're going to say Python m, and I'll boost up this just so it's a little bit easier to see. And we'll say Python m venv. So that will create the virtual environment for us to then install our dependencies into. So you'll see that here. Now that's inside of that. So you'll see here there's the bin, there's include, there's lib, and there's the Python venv configuration. So all those files live in there, which is great. There's a lot of stuff in there. So we'll close that up for now. But then to activate the virtual environment, we will do source venv bin activate. Sweet. So now what we'll do is that we will now install all the dependencies that we'll need. So we're going to do pip install, and we're going to say Boto3, which is our utility for accessing those AWS calls. We're going to use pandas for data analysis of the CSV file from S3, and we use python.env. So get that in enter, and then that will then start downloading all the packages for our project. Great. So that is all well and good. So now what we'll do is that we're now going to start writing out our script. So right now it's just printing hello world. So now we can get rid of that. And we're going to do our import statements. We're going to do import OS, import Boto3, say import pandas as PD. We'll say from.env, import load.env. So those will be our imports. Then we're going to load our credentials. So something that we're going to want to do is create a file. Cool. So we'll do file, and we're going to say .env local. So in this file, we're going to take our copied credential information that we got from the IAM Identity Center, and we're going to paste that like this. And then we're going to take our bucket name, and then we're going to add an additional, we're just going to call it bucket name. And then we're going to copy the S3 bucket name that we pulled from S3 earlier. And then that's going to be our bucket name. So we'll give that a save. And now this is going to be used in our script. So now we'll start continuing along with what we're going to install. So first step, load IAM creds plus bucket name. So we'll use load.env for that. And then the file is env local. Like that. Then we're going to declare the envs. So it's basically going to be everything just all capitalized just to make it easier. So access. Oops. Next one will be AWS secret access key, the AWS access token. There'll be bucket name. Okay, so then we're going to use OS get env, and then we're going to put that. So I'm going to copy this, put that there, and then we're going to take our env, or actually we should just type it out, probably easier. So AWS access key ID, AWS secret access key, the session token, and then this one is all caps, so bucket name. Great. So now that we've declared all of those environmental variables, now we're going to initialize our S3 client. So S3 client equals, and we'll use Boto3 to do this client, and then we're going to put in our parameters. So the service is S3, and then we could take these things. So that we need the access key, and the secret access key, and then the session token. Oh, this is already trying to format it. And then what we'll do is that we will set this equal to this one, put a comma, access key, put a comma, access key, and then a session token. So that'll be set to that. And then now we're going to write a function to list the objects in the S3 bucket, and then it's going to find the first CSV file in that bucket and then return it. And there's only one, but we're going to make it return only that file. So let's do, so list objects in the S3 bucket. So what we'll do is that we'll do response equals S3 client from above. Let's say list objects v2 method, and then bucket equals bucket name. Great. So that's how we'll get the list of objects. And then what we'll do is that we will then find the first CSV file in the bucket. So what we'll do is that we'll then going to say CSV file equals none. And then what we'll do is that we'll write a for loop. So for an object in response.get, look at the contents and an empty array. So we'll say if object key ends with CSV, then CSV file equals object key, and then we'll stop. And then we're going to do another if statement. So we'll say if CSV file is none, we're then going to print a response that no CSV file is found in the S3 bucket. Great. And then we'll do another condition. So else, say download, be like 3 parts. So download the file from S3 bucket, read the CSV file into pandas data frame, and then print the data frame in the console. Okay, great. So to do this, we're going to use our S3 client again. I'm going to say download file, bucket name, CSV file, which is that, and then CSV file again. We're then going to create a data frame, read CSV file, and then we're going to print our data frame. So print df. All right. So if we give this a save, hopefully there's no errors. So this is just a quick little look over our file so far. And everything seems to be ordered, but let's give this a try and see what happens. So now that we're in this, we're going to, and we're in the virtual environment, we're going to say python main.py, and we'll see what happens. All right, so I see our data and looks like it's all coming in through. And we also got the file downloaded as CSV. We can actually check out the original file as well to make sure that this does actually correspond with what we would expect. So we'll pull this up here. And you can see that this is the same data. So, 37, 40, 93, all at the top. So this is great. So this means that we were able to then download our code. So use Python to get our S3 bucket, retrieve the CSV file, and then download that into data frame and then print it, and then also save it in the project. So we were able to then use this IAM Identity Center permission set to then get keys for it that will expire in 4 hours minus the time that we've been building this, to then actually access the data, which is pretty exciting because we're able to then, write, not a huge script to be able to then get access to this data that is private. So that shows you the power of these IAM credentials, because we're able to then have this repeating token that will be changing every so often, while we're able to then get specific access to the resources and the services that we need in AWS. All right, so that was a pretty exciting deep dive into IAM Identity Center and how to set it up for a new AWS account. So that's exactly what we did. So we set it up in a new AWS account. We got to see how to create a user and log into a user. We got to see how to create a permission set that gave specific access to an S3 bucket that we created and a CSV file that we downloaded from Nasdaq and uploaded to that S3 bucket. We're then able to see how to attach those permissions to a group and then add that group to an organization that a user is a part of, so that when you logged in as that IAM Identity Center user, you're able to then have access to download the data that was within the S3 bucket that we gave the user permission for. So you can kind of see how easy it is to create these permissions that also are time limited. So every time that you would need to get credentials for these services, you'd be able to then get this token that keeps regenerating every 4 hours or 2 hours or whatever you set it at. And then you're able to then plug those into your env file within your scripts like we just did with Python. And then once you use those credentials, you can then assume the privileges and the responsibilities and basically the access levels for that specific IAM Identity Center role and any sort of Boto3 commands like in Python or any sort of commands that you might use. So I hope that this was really helpful for you to see exactly how to plug IAM Identity Center in and why I think it is like one of the most powerful services within AWS to be able to guard and limit access to specific resources while also enabling you to use those credentials in a short-lived manner while also keeping complete access to the services that you need. So with that, I hope this video is really helpful for you and gets you started on your journey. If you end up using this video, please feel free to shout me out on social. I'd love to support and cheer you on. And my handle is Brian H. Huff. So that's in the comments below. So definitely post if you like this video and you want to see more content. Also, feel free to drop in the comments what you want to see next. What types of services, what types of integrations, what types of systems do you want to see me build on my YouTube channel? So with that, I hope you have a great rest of your day, afternoon, or evening, and I'll see you all next time. All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.